How's it going, guys? Welcome back to the Black Metal Rebellion. I'm your host, Jesse Morgan, aka Slammerella, and today we have a review to do, this time on the band Drama Noir. And if you've seen my last post on this channel, that would be their full album, A Necromancy Lore. And if you feel like getting your album reviewed on this channel, you can always contact me via my email on the back end of the channel, or contact me through any of my social media outlets and submit your project or EP or whatever. Although I do have to let you know that if it doesn't meet the 70% out of 100 rating, I won't be able to review it, because I like to promote bands on here and give them a positive promotion. I don't really like to do rotten ratings where if I don't feel it's worthy of 70% out of 100 or 7 out of 10, I just won't promote it, because I don't want to give bad promotion to bands. That's just not something I feel like doing on here. So with that being said, let's get on to the review of Drama Noir's second album from August 31st of this year, 2020, A Necromancy Lore. So before this album, the only thing they have was a single and their first album from 2018 called Princess Iram, and they started back in 2017. They are currently signed to Drakkar Productions, so that might strike your fancy. I know a lot of really good bands are on Drakkar Productions. It would be kind of neat to see Drakir on Drakkar in the future, but we'll see. So if you don't know Drama Noir, they are a atmospheric, sort of symphonic blackened death metal band from Corinth, Greece. I know a lot of people don't really know too many black metal bands from Greece, so this should be your next one to check out after Rotting Christ, of course. If you don't know Rotting Christ, they are also from Greece. Excellent black metal. So the members of Drama Noir currently are Mephisto on guitar and keyboards, Nyctelios on vocals, Pisces Thanatos on bass, and Yngvi on drums. So as usual, we're going to start off with the vocals first, which are high in the mix, not too abrasive though, slightly above the guitar and drums. They are very consistent and strong, as well as being pretty on point in the timing section. As for the style of the vocals you can expect on this album, they are kind of a barked, demonic, high to mid-range growl, sometimes similar to that of Varg or Burzum's faster, earlier works. The Chaos MELTHRON song kind of demonstrates those type of vocals, and at times they can be slightly lower in range and kind of these grittier growls, such as seen in Devolution in The Curve of Time. Now as for the guitars, they are mid to high in the mix, about on par with the drums, but they also include a great beefy kind of blazing tone. They are tight and well controlled and pretty precise. The riffs you can expect on here are tremolos, some quick, chuggy, palm-muted riffs, as well as some epic, adventurous compositions throughout. There's also galloping melodeath riffs, and the odd kind of doomy riffs seen in Luminous Seduction. A lot of the Amon Amarth type riffs that pop out through here can also be found in Last Incantation. As for the bass, it was kind of low in the mix, but it had a clunky, rattling, deep tone with maybe some slight gain. I found it was well performed, but while it was buried beneath the guitars and drums, it was hard to make out. There was like an odd short moment that shined on Relics of My Enemies, but you really had to be paying attention. So with this bass part in the album, it was more of a subtle extra hint of flavor in the background, if you could catch it. As for the drums, they were also mid to high in the mix, also on par with the guitars. They were great and dynamic though. The performance and conviction that Yngvi portrayed was pretty high and powerful, and he had excellent timing. He had control over slow merging into fast beats and vice versa. He also had some smooth flowing tom fills, a steady and pounding pace keeping throughout, well executed double kicks and blast beats, and a nice use of cymbal work that surrounded the riff and beat accents. So now we're going to go on to my favorite tracks off of this album, and they were easily these two. First track that I found really popped out and stood its ground with me was track number 2, Chaos MELTHRON. Catchy main riff for sure, very galloping and very melodeath sounding, almost hypnotizing throughout the song, and had a short but soulful melancholic solo. The second track that I found really stood out on this album was track number 5, called The Last Incantation. It had a pretty catchy chorus with the last incantation being chanted throughout, as well as another solo with feeling and kind of a sorrowful composition. The other tracks were good, and I was trying to find a third track to use as an example here. I kind of wanted to use the Cyber Demon of Necromancy, I believe the track was called. If not, I'll put it here. But I didn't feel the song had enough that jumped out at me to really put on the favorite tracks list. I also wanted to feature DEVOLUTION in the Curve of Time, but for whatever reason I couldn't find enough to really highlight about that song to make it a third favorite track. But nonetheless, Chaos MELTHRON and The Last Incantation were really good. They stood out to me amongst the other tracks, and those were the ones that I kept going back to for those really hypnotic, mellow death type of galloping, adventurous riffs and kind of meaningful, sorrowful solos. So let's get on to my overall thoughts on this album, shall we? I felt it was a driving, moody force of melodic black and death metal, akin to a fog-laden carriage ride drawn by horses through an ominous forest. It was a dark adventure fueled by bloodlust and necromancy, with enemies ready to strike at any moment. It had a sort of Dimmu Borgir feel, but with less keys and more Amon Amarth melodeath riffs, reminiscent of perhaps Black Lion Records lineup of contenders. So if you know Black Lion Records and the bands I have reviewed on here before about them, this would fit nicely into that roster. With that being said, there were a few weaknesses and improvements that I could see with this album. Some of the songs and riffs felt a little samey, which means I felt they suffer from a lack of diversity to really set them apart and give them their own voice on the album. The other thing that I noticed was a bit of a weak snare. It kind of had a reserved and quieter level in the mix. You know me, I like that really snappy, crisp, punching snare that doesn't, overtake any of the other instruments, but I like to be more present and more pronounced to accentuate the beats and the riffs that it accompanies. And the final kind of weakness and improvement that I noticed on this was the obvious bass being too low. However, you can't really fault that in the black metal genre. I do, however, like to hear it though, because the bass player obviously was putting forth some effort and was talented, and the extra little spice and diversity that I heard on top of the already driving riffs would have been nice to have been heard a little louder, but it was kind of easily forgotten and nearly had any time to shine. So, with all things considered and all that discussed, I'm going to have to give this a 7.5 out of 10 or a 75 out of 100 rating. Once again, if you guys want to get your album reviewed on this channel, please contact me in the email at the back end of the channel, or contact me via any of my social media outlets, my page on Facebook, or contact me on Instagram. All the links should be in the description box below. I'm Jesse Morgan, and I would buy this album. Cheers for glory for the Rebel Alliance. Slammerella out.